There's a lot of you that it's been really nice working with, and I hope that we get to continue to work together outside of the project and beyond. So we had 58 posters that were in the session, which I thought was stellar. It was a really great session. And they were from stakeholders, faculty, and 42 students from across our tri-state consortium. So that was really impressive. And last night was really great. Thank you to all the judges that judged the student poster competition. This year we had 3 winners, all from the state of Nevada. We swept it. Sorry, tri-state. And our first, the first winner that we had, our first place winner, is Ben Hatchett. He was poster number 13 with the title of the Boreal Heat Engine and Hemispheric Climate. Ben, are you in here? Yay! Come on up and get your prize. So the first prize, the first place winner gets a new Kindle Fire HD and a case. Our second place winner is out of the education component. Ben is a UNR DRI graduate student. Our second place winner is Heather Skaza from UNLV, and her poster was Using Nevada's Climate Research for K-12 Science Curriculum. Yay, Heather! And our third place poster winner is actually not here. She had to fly home last night. It was Brittany Johnson. She's a DRI UNR student, and her title was Elevational and Latitudinal Patterns in Soil Properties along the 2 NevCan elevation transects and their relationship to climate. So I will be sending Britt her Kindle, and she was just telling me last night, I never win anyway. And she happened to take 3rd place. I would like to thank all of you students. You do amazing work. Thank you to the stakeholders for sharing, and for the faculty as well for presenting. Thank you. And the judges too. Oh yeah, all the judges we had were from all 3 states, so did want to thank all of them. There was an update to the shuttle that's coming at 3:15. They're not doing 2 rounds. It's 2 shuttles at one time at 3:15 doing the airport Hyatt loop. So be out at 3:15.
Next on our agenda is pulling all of this together. And so I would like to invite Scott McCurry from Concur to help with this summarization, and we'll continue to solicit your input.
All right, Lynn, thanks very much. We have a few steps to our final agenda, I think culminating in what we hope are some very interesting statements of intent to collaborate, and we'll see how many of those there are. What we want to do first is ask all the topic area conveners to come up and join us here on the dais, and we're going to hear from each of them in turn, probably about a 5-minute summary of the main highlights that we heard. We then want to open the floor to everyone else and see if there are any points to add or any questions or perhaps new observations. After that, we're going to invite the statements of intent to collaborate. And we know we have several, we just don't know how many we have. And that'll be a little bit of a surprise, I think, for all of us. So we'll carry on with that. And then Lynn will introduce the other state EPSCoR directors for their observations, and we'll move on to the very end of our meeting. So that's the flow. But let's ask the topic area conveners, please, to join us, all three of you, just if you could come up now. And we'll have a few minutes from you, some questions, and then some observations. Yeah.
Stage is booby-trapped with wires. Well, it's hard to obviously summarize so much in a short period of time, but I'm going to go over at least a few of the items that seem to stand out. This was the Climate Change Effects Group. First of all, I would just like to point out that each of the different tables noted that the meeting was really a good step towards learning about our different cultures that we work in. These are kind of research cultures or application cultures that we have. We're here obviously for common interests, but we actually have quite different mandates between academia or policy or land management. And that's a really important thing to recognize. And beginning kind of with the research area, it's actually sometimes hard to work together, to cross the aisle, so to speak. It's not just, oh, I want to collaborate with you, you want to collaborate with me, let's do it. We have different kind of factors that come into that. And so the recognition of that was an important point. One suggestion was potentially an advisory group. There are groups like that meet on climate throughout the Great Basin, and so one of the suggestions would be to make sure that we are all kind of sending representatives to these different meetings. This meeting was very valuable. There was, but we can't hold this exact meeting. There's no funding to continue to hold this meeting, but there are other kinds of meetings, and so one of the things that should come out from this is we'll at least have a list of who was here, and if you are interested in continuing with this kind of a dialogue, be aware of some of those meeting opportunities that are out there. A suggestion to try and begin to articulate more targeted or focused problems, finding where we already have overlap. So part of that came from discussions here, but that's one of those ongoing types of things. We all recognize that we're money stressed. And so when, particularly for those who are writing proposals, and particularly for those in academia, if there are applied benefits, talk with your collaborators in the, with the agencies when you're building these proposals, and see if there is ways to put funding in for those kind of applied types of benefits, because sometimes it's not a lot of money and it can be tied in. So that's something to be aware of. There's the goal to collaborate more effectively on data dissemination. I can talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but the whole potential of data sharing is probably a rich opportunity. We have probably a lot more. I'm guessing that right now the sum is not as great as of all the parts that are here, and so we need to make better efforts in that area. Similarly, to work hard to support existing infrastructure. Everyone has put in infrastructure here. We can, if we understand what we all have, we can probably leverage that more effectively. And I think I'll talk a little bit more on that later as well. Just a couple of other things on research. I learned this one, I didn't realize it. In the same way that we have our seminar series, many of the agencies have seminars and seminar series, and more folks in academia that are doing research, especially if they're doing it on lands of these agencies, should be making contact and going and presenting their research to share back what's going on. And the last one would be that many of the folks here are more on the physical side, at least that were in our group. And one of the action items would begin seeking more collaborations with social sciences, recognizing that for a lot of our work to be applied or actionable, it's going to come through a social science application for how it impacts people. In the area of responding to communication of science, there was the suggestion of an action item to kind of develop some kind of a more coherent educational plan, recognizing that we actually need professionals to help us do this, and maybe when Donica is presenting on the communication side, they might have some other inputs on that. None of us, I noticed, were Twittering during our session, and there's many professionally oriented social media types of opportunities. Some of the ones that were listed, ResearchGate, academia.edu, even Mendeley for sharing PDFs and kind of just getting a bit better sharing of who has what out there. So that's an area where we can certainly put more efforts. One suggestion was to try and actually develop a unified shared message on climate change. I'm not sure we have such a thing, so that was an interesting one. I'm hoping somebody volunteered to do that. And just actually work harder to create more press releases. I know that is time consuming and that's not so easy, but we should each probably be familiar with the outreach folks in our own organizations and try and get the word out more often about what we're doing. And the last thing I'm going to mention that came up was simply politics. And here I'm not talking about the internal politics, but the actual politics associated with policy, decision-making, legislature. We're not very well integrated. There was the recognition that that group is particularly not as well represented here, and that's where part of this message is going to have to go as well. Obviously, it's got to be well crafted and sophisticated, and there's steps along the way, but that's moving forward from this meeting. That would be an important area to pursue.
Well, Scott led off his comments by observing that there are different professional cultures at work, and actually he took steps in his own summary to, in a sense, reach across the aisle and talk about the need for a little bit more attention to the whole point of communication, using communication tools, and also pointing out perhaps a rather obvious gap that the participation of the policy sector in Nevada, Idaho, and New Mexico at this meeting is pretty light, and perhaps a direction for the future is to broaden that table a little more extensively. So we want to turn next to Helen, who worked very hard in her final session on the state of climate change planning.
Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. And you know, I think a number of the points that Scott Mensing just raised from session A is very similar to some of the same experiences we had in session B. Session B, the discussion yesterday really focused around identifying current state of planning for climate change and responses that representatives from all 3 states, we had representatives from New Mexico, Idaho, and Nevada sitting at our tables, and we had good representation from a number of the different sectors. We had representatives from business, nonprofit organizations representing rural agricultural interests. We had academics from all three university systems and across Idaho, Nevada, and New Mexico. And we also had large representation from government agencies, from the local and state and federal agencies sitting at our table. And today it was interesting. We kind of broke the rules. We didn't have people sitting at 4 separate tables. We had everybody sitting at a very long table. We put together all of our round tables and had a really good discussion about what are some possible things that we could do together. And the conversation got started by a graduate student from Idaho, and she kicked it off about a seminar idea she had for creating a class on climate change. And the next thing we knew, other representatives at the table were saying, hey, you could use our group's work in New Mexico on acequias to help your students develop analytical skills on these issues. We need economic analyses. We need better measurements. And so across the different disciplines and across different experiences, that's how our conversation got started. And the conversation really moved on to different education opportunities, research opportunities, communication opportunities, working with businesses here in Las Vegas and outside, recognition that utilities really need to be part of the conversation as well. I'm not doing my group justice because it was a really good discussion. And I'm going to, rather than describe what collaborations are intended, I'm going to allow the participants to actually describe their intent to collaborate. But I know, speaking for myself, there are a number of, I spoke with Marco Vallada from the city of Las Vegas. I spoke with a number of different people from New Mexico, Idaho, and even SNWA about some other great potential collaborations for our students and colleagues, and a real opportunity to make a difference, which doesn't happen every day. So it was an honor. Thank you.
Helen, thanks very much. I have to admit I was a little surprised when I went into the room and I saw Helen in front writing on the flip chart, and everybody was in a long table very engaged, and I thought, really? Is that how they chose to do it? And it worked great. And so breaking the rules sometimes for breakouts is the right way to do it. So Donica is going to continue with the communication group, and they came up with a lot of ideas as well. I'll let you summarize.
Again, I'm just going to hit some of the ideas, and we are going to have time when we're done here for people in the groups to add. So like Helen, it's hard to do justice to a long conversation, but if anybody in our group wants to add to this, please feel free to stand up when we have an opportunity. The first point I wanted to make was one that came up in Todd's group, and they talked about how we actually have very different ideas of what the word collaboration even means. And they made the observation that we have different currencies for what collaboration equals. If you're an academic, a collaboration is a paper. If you're an educator, it might be lesson plans. If you're an agency, it could be, a white paper or a regional plan. So one suggestion was to actually have a workshop on what collaboration means and what successful collaborations look like for different types of people. So I would make that as a recommendation for future EPSCO or other grant convening conferences. We talk about collaboration as if we all have a shared sense of what that means. But as a matter of fact, it can vary a lot between types of groups. So some of the same ideas that Scott brought out, being much more specific about what we mean. The second idea that came up across almost all of the groups was this need to have some shared, simple message about what climate change means in this region. The idea was, You know, if you could get it in 3 bullet points and put it on the back of a business card, or, you know, 5 points on a handout, maybe illustrations, but something that if we could find a working group of a few scientists and a few communicators to develop this message that we could then share, it might be helpful to people when they begin these conversations. So again, that was an idea that came up. We need very simple, very clear messages based on the input of experts who know how to communicate and have a sense of how to avoid loaded words or using things that have been found to be effective. A third suggestion that came up across several of the groups was a need to, as we develop these materials for communicating, is to have a repository. And maybe the data portal could be a place where we could begin to put these materials. The ideas were, one, you could develop visualizations for simple scientific processes that if somebody wanted to bring it into a classroom or into a paper, that you would have these visualizations geared to different age groups on different topics that would just be available to take and use for your own purposes. Another would be, maybe there are toolkits that already exist of different kinds of materials, but if one doesn't, or if we want to make it more localized for our own region, is to develop a toolkit for climate change communication that, again, with some collaboration, could be something that might be of use to many types of people. Following up on a couple of the points that Scott made, we also had people recommend more press releases about papers, and while that does take a lot of time and money, and marketing departments at universities are cut back the way everyone else is, journalism schools have classes for people learning how to write press releases. And maybe, you know, you could bring a group of papers to one of those classes and they could work on it. The journalism students would learn how difficult it is to do a press release on a scientific topic, and you would get some maybe usable, maybe not usable, but you'd have something to work with. So thinking about those kinds of collaborations. Fred led a really nice group of graduate students talking about things that they wanted to try, and one of them was to provide more training and communication to science graduate students. Help them figure out how to do an elevator pitch for their research, how to present a poster, and videotape them. And one of the students said, why aren't we videotaping our presentations from our posters, choosing the best and putting them on the web? People could learn from those and the students would get feedback. So more incorporating of that kind of work for grad students could be very useful, because they're entering an information environment that's very, very different than what we did. And they're going to be expected to do communication about their research that's far different from just publishing in peer journals, peer-reviewed journals. So helping them get those tools and matching them with faculty in marketing and journalism and business is going to be very helpful, I think, for their own careers. So those are some of the main ideas, and then, like I said, if our groups want to add, they can.
Thanks very much, Donica. So in just a few minutes, we want to turn back to you and invite your statements. But before we do that, I want to pause and ask the topic area conveners if they have any comments on each other's summaries, and then open the floor to any additional strong ideas or perhaps questions back to the conveners before we get to the statements of intent to collaborate. Any back and forth you want to have? Or
I thought they were awesome. Scott just asked, how do we help scientists learn more about social media? There's actually different workshops. Most of your universities, I'm sure, have some faculty that are teaching social media. Todd went to the AAAS meeting where there's some workshops there on social media and science. Yes. He's nodding his head yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was very, very productive.
So I think those resources exist. They exist on your campuses. Probably faculty would be very happy to come over and do a workshop.
Thank you.
Yes.
Would you include yourself as one of those faculty?
Yes.
Great.
Good question. Any other commentary from the topic area conveners? Helen?
I just want to say that this has been a great opportunity. I can honestly say that this has not been a comfortable spot to be in to try to work on so many different areas, but I have learned so much, and I really want to say I have really appreciated meeting so many different stakeholders and getting an appreciation from all the different perspectives and on climate change.
Deal. Excellent. Any other comments? You good? All right. So let me open the floor. Donica and other presenters said, well, if I leave out an important idea, members of my group, please fold in. And again, this is not, we're not yet asking for your statements of collaboration, just in clarifications or other points you're eager to make at this point. Anyone? Don't see any, Lynn. Okay, so in that case, we will pivot to the statements about potential collaboration. And I understand, Scott, you may have something to put on the table here.
Sure.
All right.
I have to admit that as much as we encouraged everyone to make collaborations, it didn't occur to me until about a half an hour before lunch that I hadn't even thought about it the whole time. But I'm working on a project which needs collaborators. And so the one collaboration that I did put together, he's laughing, is with Todd Hopkins. But this is an opportunity to invite others to collaborate on this. The project is that moving forward, we have to sustain this infrastructure that we've put together. And there's a lot of discussion about data that could be synthesized and a lot of different people that have networks out there. We built a network, and how to fund that is not so easy. And so this project is going to be a group of folks, and mostly so far I'm working with institutional folks, but this is an invitation. I made the invitation to Todd, he accepted, and this would be to others who are interested in collaborating in relation to developing a statewide data network that relates to climate and hazards type data, and that is supported by sensors, particularly remote towers and sensors that are out distributed across the state, so that we have a much more cohesive and coherent data structure and data repository and analysis and availability of these data for making decisions, for policy, for legislation, etc. I think together we actually have quite a bit, but we're not so organized. So that's the project I'm working on. Todd agreed to collaborate. This was my first thought that I really actually need land agencies that are doing this as well. And since he represents a number of land agencies, that's where I started. But this is an invitation to others as well. We're going to actually start these meetings fairly soon as I can actually set up a doodle. All right. One.
Yes.
Do I have to stay on the stage? Or?
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. So, Lynn, I hear that you may have a collaborative intent that you'd like to share.
Well,
what is it?
Well, is this working? I talked to everyone this morning. It's not?
No, turn it.
The on button is up. Hello? I'll come use the other one. I mentioned earlier this morning I had a nice chat like Scott. I didn't think about collaborations at first. I'm prompting all of you, and then I realized last night, oh, I got to get moving on this. So at a poster session, a graduate student and a gentleman from the NRCS and I agreed to co-author a paper on the soil properties of our NevCan monitoring stations. And then I have two others that I mentioned before that I'm going to pursue. One's a collaboration with a female faculty member in New Mexico that we had talked about previously and didn't follow through on. So this workshop has motivated me to follow through on that initial discussion. And then I intend to be contacting some of you about some collaborative remote sensing research across the 3 states. So hopefully this has given all of you an idea, and we're going to invite others if you want to make a statement of, yes, I've formed this collaboration, or I have this idea and I want some collaborators on board.
So the idea is this is not a contract. But it is an intent, and we think intent is a good word because it implies some forethought, and it also implies, well, maybe there's some follow-up that might need to happen after this meeting. So with those carefully chosen words, we are very eager to hear, are there other people here that have attended the workshop and perhaps formed, as Lynn said, a new collaboration or have an intent to create a new one? And we really would invite anyone who wants to step up to go ahead and share that with the group. Yes. And please mention your name and your affiliation as well.
Hello. Okay, it is working.
Yes.
My name's Nina Oakley. I'm with the Western Regional Climate Center. And we've been doing a lot of research as of late of how to make usable web pages. And we've been testing, we just started testing for web usability to improve some of our pages. And so I made contact with the people who are designing the Nevada Climate Change Portal, and we're both in the same town doing similar things. So we'd like to work together and share our ideas on testing web usability for the provision of climate data. And we invite anyone else who's also testing web usability to collaborate with us and share their ideas on how to effectively communicate climate information.
That's great. So a very strong idea in the communication realm, and the beginnings of a collaboration and an invitation for others to join. Anyone else want to share an idea? Yes, come on up.
I'm Tom Albright from UNL. I have 2 kinds of collaborations. One kind, the collaborator knows about it, and the other kind, the collaborators don't know about it. But you know, this is an informal group for a meeting of this size, so let's go with it. I was just having a conversation with Scott Nowicki. We're both working on some remote sensing work, and he said UNLV, UNR, on skin temperature. So we're talking about ways we could kind of unify things we're already doing and maybe look at some things in the pipe. And then a lot of the people working at the Sheep Range, which is a site I haven't made it to yet, are
where the field trip went.
Yep. I was doing the facilitator training, which was time well spent. But, I'll make it there some other time. But I'd like to, we were deploying a lot of these little micro temperature sensors, and I'd really like to see some coordination in how we can leverage those and make them kind of work together over larger scales.
So that's, second one is the surprise collaborative intent.
Well,
but you've talked a little bit. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Lynn, does this mic work?
I think it does.
I could get it to work, but
Derek Kanekis, University of Nevada. We're offering a course in fall for the first time that's funded through the EBSCOR. That's climate change, mitigation, and adaptation policy. And we're requiring students to find community clients, broadly defined, to actually use climate data. So we're going to talk to the Western Regional Climate Center to use some of their data, and then actually do plans for, and I'd open up for any organization, any of the stakeholders who want student labor on a project. We're defining it very broadly.
That's great. So not only have you created a collaboration, you've created a class that requires every student to be a collaborator.
Yes, and hopefully to teach some new skills. The idea is we'd be able to get social science students and economists looking at climate data and to look at the applicability of it.
That's great. And that's a fall course?
Fall course. So if
Excellent.
anybody here wants a group of students, they can present it via Skype as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other ideas to share? Yes, go ahead. And do introduce yourself, please.
My name is John Mejia. I work at the Desert Research Institute in Reno, Nevada. I work for the climate modeling group, and I've been working with EPSCoR funding for the last 3.5 years in developing climate modeling infrastructure for the state of Nevada. One success story, I would say, that part of this NSF EPSCoR project, because the connection we had is relatively long. Well, it's been ongoing for more than 1 year already. We keep meeting with the Southern Nevada Water Authority because of the outcome of those relationships. We are engaging in the project. So, and specifically, as part of this meeting, we again a partner in terms of getting a support letter for one of the proposals I'm putting together this April.
Okay.
So from the Southern Nevada Water Authority stating that they are interested in the type of work I'm doing.
Very good.
Or kind of support my proposal. At the same time, they also has shown some interest in the type of work we are doing relative to the urban heat island effect, characterizing the urban heat island, and also creating simulated output using urban canopy modeling as part of the group effort. And they are interested to see some of the scenarios we can provide using that simulated framework for the city of Las Vegas as well. So
That's great.
we are strengthening that partnership. It's on intentions to keep looking at our efforts, but in the long run, we hope we can engage into more serious collaborations.
Excellent. So beginning with the letter of support, really focusing on the idea of heat islands and canopy. And,
I
mean,
to
two different
clarify
ideas.
that, the letter of intent is really related to some of the efforts I'm trying to lead in creating seasonal forecast for Western United States at scales that are relevant for impact or end users and impact studies. This is not related to climate change, but other scales in terms of future projections up to 9-month lead time. So these are mostly related to more tangible projections into the future.
Good. Excellent. Thanks very much. And the request from those of you who are presenting is to please summarize in a sentence or two or three your idea for collaboration and transmit that to Lynn, because she is very eager to include them in the meeting summary. Aren't you, Lynn?
Yes, I'll say more about that later.
Okay. All right. Others? Yes, Scotty.
So my name's Scotty Strachan. I'm from the University of Nevada, Reno, and I've been working on the instrumentation out here. And I don't have any big plans for proposals to talk about because I'm pretty engaged in projects right now, but we have been talking about communication between the scientists and either the landowners or the agencies that are concerned in the areas. And one of the things that came up in our talk was, in our roundtables, were that some of the land management agencies would really like us scientists to stop in a little bit more often and gab about what we're up to. And I told them, well, you know, as long as you're not going to put the tripwires up for me across the door when I come through, I'll stop in. And so hopefully, when the the Fish and Wildlife Service here puts together a brown bag seminar series, I told them I would certainly bring a presentation in and talk about what we're doing. In addition to that, I said even, you know, if they don't have something organized the next time I'm through, I'm going to be down here twice a year maintaining some of the stations. I'll have a presentation locked and loaded with me on a flash drive that I can come in on relatively short notice, a couple days notice, no problem, and and talk about whatever they like to hear. And it was kind of refreshing to hear that from the Fish and Wildlife Service here, because you know, not all land management agencies have that attitude, and sometimes they just sort of want to process you and get your permit approved and get on to the next problem. And so to hear them say that they are interested, they do want to hear back, is very refreshing. So it's a small thing, but I agreed to it. So there you go.
It's a good step. And so the concept is opportunity presents itself for a brown bag. You stop in, you give it, and kind of low impact level of commitment, but great idea, and could extend to other land management agencies. Other folks who want to comment? Yes, go ahead. And please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lee Bernacki. I'm a postdoctoral researcher on a climate change and wheat agriculture project at U, Idaho. And this idea is half-baked, but I've been encouraged to improve my proposal writing skills. And I would like to invite anyone who's interested in creating some kind of repository for best practices of climate communication, given that there is a huge body of research on communication, on rhetoric of climate change, on how we should do these framing exercises, visualizations. I think that some resource like that where people could add to it, whether it's a wiki or something like that, would be really valuable for all scientists, but especially in the West.
That's great. Thanks, Lee. So I believe this is the idea, Donica, that you mentioned that arose from your group. Great. So it's an invitation and clearly puts a spotlight on a need that was identified throughout, I think, this workshop in many of the groups. Thanks very much. Any other comments, ideas, proposals? Gail.
I kind of feel like this is Collaborators Anonymous. So yesterday, Susan Moore from the Lieutenant Governor's Office in Nevada was here, and we talked about, she was very interested in learning more about what's going on in the state with regards to research. She's the science policy advisor. So we agreed to get together in the near future to keep their office more informed and have some more interactions. And that speaks to a comment that Scott Bensing made about connecting with our legislators.
That's great. And so there's an intent to have an ongoing conversation. That's great. So despite Gail's comment about the Collaborators Anonymous, you've all pretty much identified yourselves. You haven't necessarily named all of your potential collaborating partners, but I'm sure as we put the meeting summary together, we'd be eager to hear more about that. Yes? From the front of the room to the back of the room, and back. No, you were up here, day one.
Yeah, this is working now, I guess. My name is Kelly Revin. I'm with the Western Regional Climate Center. And two things. One, just a little extension on what Nina Oakley just mentioned. We, in addition to our main mission of serving up weather and climate data and information for the Western states, we have another collaboration with the Southwest Climate Science Center, which is part of the Department of Interior. And we're in a state which is mostly managed by the Department of Interior, and most of the West, a lot of it is Department of Interior, and we're developing some web pages. Our main mission is just deals with climate in its generality as the Western Regional Climate Center, but this project with the Climate Science Center is especially tailored toward climate change, and we're developing some web pages that are sort of folding our two sets of pages together and offering more on the subject of climate change. And we are going to be looking for basically some guinea pigs to help test out these pages, as Nina mentioned, to make them more usable. So we'd invite, and we'll probably be contacting people here along the way as we're sort of ready to do that. And the second thing is we're going to be hosting the Great Basin Climate Forum, something we're having twice a year now. and Tamara Wall, who is here, and Todd. Todd is also part of this, and with the Great Basin LCC, and that'll be on May 3rd, and up in Reno at DRI.
Great. So, webpage collaboration with Guinea Pigs Wanted and an upcoming important workshop with the Great Basin. Yes, Lynn, another one.
Well, yes and no. I'm going to tie this in with Lee Bernanke's collaboration, and I'll say I'm going to collaborate with you. I was going to try to twist arms with Kelly Redmond, John Abazaku at University of Idaho. I'm not certain who the appropriate person would be at New Mexico. Because coming out of all these discussions, there's this true need to communicate what is climate change and to keep it simple. And so I think if one of us from each state partner with Lee and build upon Kelly's web pages and maybe develop a wiki. So I'm encouraging people to pile on to some of these collaborations, these efforts that have been announced here. And also, I'll turn over the mic to anybody else, but that's my add-on.
So your concept is to link the collaborations that have just been named together because they will reinforce each other.
Correct.
Okay, very good. And you just thought of that?
Yeah.
That's cool. Good job. Any other new ideas people would like to share? Yes, sir. And please introduce yourself.
My name is Dave. I'm a recovering collaborator. Welcome to all the rest of you here. I teach at College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls. Over the years, we have established a really neat relationship with a lot of K-12 teachers in the area. Some different things that I've heard that I would like to offer my services in helping you guys tie with some K-12 teachers, some students, maybe the website testing kind of thing, to get that information out there to some of those folks in that whole K-12 arena, and possibly get some feedback from them on usability and viability and some other things that you might want to improve on that. So.
Excellent. So linkage to the K-12 arena and an opportunity for cross-state collaboration and feedback. Other ideas people want to share? No? Are we exhausted? Or maybe exhausted of ideas? Well, maybe so. That was a good, what, 8 to 10?
12.
12. Was it 12?
Well, I counted Lynn twice.
Excellent. So the conveners had a little pool, actually, before we started.
People or ideas?
Ideas.
Oh,
And Donica and I both guessed 12.
I have 16 because.
Oh, you have 16.
4 ideas, right?
Okay, see, this demonstrates how scientists can cherry pick data and change it with their observations. Did you have another one?
Well, just to make it a baker's dozen.
Yes.
Because they didn't win. Yes, just very briefly.
Use the microphone, please.
How somebody else wins the bet.
Dale Devitt, UNLV, and I've just had a very casual conversation with air quality control here in Clark County.
Right.
And so they're very much interested in utilizing our Transect system to deploy air quality sensors. And so we're hoping to build
That's
upon
great.
that. So it's a good start.
Air quality in Clark County is a big issue. Well done. So are we set with our baker's dozen? Yes. Maybe not.
Since I thought number 13 is not a good one, I wanted to add the 14th count.
Good, please.
Well, actually, I'm from Idaho, supported by EBSCOR all along. So the, from the stakeholder engagement side of things, I think even though we are seeing a lot of, enthusiasm and interest, I think number one thing that comes to my mind is, of course, funding is the one that can actually really tighten up these connections between the scientists, researchers, and also with the stakeholders. So any experience from here that you would share in the future for Idaho, Nevada, or New Mexico, I think that would be really helpful for us to really take that kind of framework and see how we can really make our connections with the local agencies or stakeholders more positive.
So the idea of learning lessons from what's tried here in Nevada and offer it for transfer.
Yeah, I know it may be coming down the road, but I understand that, of course, if there is some kind of even a template that you establish out of this conference, that will give us an idea of what kind of interactions that you want to establish to be showing as a successful partnership between the agencies or local partners that you want to come up with. That may give us an idea of how we can do the same thing in Idaho.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yes, please. Helen, you might win. Helen guessed 16.
I'm Guobin Tang from the DRI, the DIS, the Earth and Ecosystem Science. I come here, so I want to take advantage of this good opportunity to try to find some potential collaborator on a NASA proposal. So my idea is to modeling how on the NASA carbon cycle proposal. So my purpose is using the modeling, the biogeochemical model how vegetation grows and the water movement affect the carbon cycle, especially the dissolved organic carbon and biomass in the rivers. Currently, because my strength is modeling, so I have a strong modeling skill. I also developed a sophisticated model, but I need some experts, they have strong field experiments or measurements to measure the DOC and biomass in the rivers or in the lakes. So that study region could be anywhere. So then if you know somebody or has some interest in, could you let me know? So I'm very thankful for that one. So
very good. So it's an invitation to collaborate
right.
for an emerging proposal on the carbon cycle and modeling.
Yeah, yes.
Very good.
So this is this project focuses on the carbon cycle SIM2. So modeling the critical carbon process and transformation transport at the terrestrial or cortical interface, like the watershed, the rivers, and lakes. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Other ideas to share? Nick.
I've lost count of the numbers, so I'm not betting. I'm not trying to get somebody a prize. Anyway, I'm Nick Lancaster from Desert Research Institute. One of the things that struck me during this workshop is that there's a huge amount of expertise and a very wide range of projects that are going on related to climate change within Nevada and our tri-state partners. One of the concerns that I have is that at the end of the Nevada project in a few months' time, the mechanism and for communicating between these different people who are supported by the project and others will sort of, to some degree, disappear. And my sort of suggestion for a collaboration which involves sort of everybody would really be to have a database or a directory of people who are working on climate change related topics, at least initially in the state of Nevada, and then perhaps adding in from other adjacent territories and states. Because it seems to me that if there was something and it was on the web that was appropriately keyworded, that if somebody was interested in any aspect of climate change research, was looking for a particular type of expertise, that they could find this relatively easily on the web, and then find individuals who had the areas of expertise that might be appropriate to that particular problem.
Excellent. So a web-based database or inventory of people in Nevada and perhaps the broader region working on climate change, organized by keyword and searchable. Very good idea. Any other comments, ideas to share? I don't see any. That was 16. Helen, you win. She said, well, it's you know, the NCAA tournament, Sweet 16, why not? So she was right. All right, I think at this stage, Lynn, we're ready to pivot to your final wrap-up. I know that one of the things you will remind people to do is pay attention to the evaluation, which our evaluator, Lisa, has worked very hard to kick out today, in fact, fresh off the press. So Lynn, back to you.
Thank you, Scott. And I know a lot of us, when we hear the word survey, evaluation, oh, I don't have time for that. Lisa has promised me it's a 15-minute evaluation on the pluses and minuses of this workshop, what worked, what didn't. And your feedback will be very important for future workshops, not only for this EPSCoR project, but future EPSCoR projects from the tri-state area. So these comments are very important. And similar to that, you're going to be getting an email from me following up on these little statements of potential or real collaborations that we've been able to identify and move forward. And I will provide you with a link to enter your name, institution, what your idea is, who your collaborators are, and where they're at. And the plus of this is it will get folded into our report summary. So maybe you had some rough ideas, but you really hadn't talked to people or really fleshed out the idea. This will be an opportunity for you to see what other people just mentioned, and maybe some others that will be in that workshop summary, and then you'll know who to contact and say, hey, this is something that I have an interest in, may I join you? And I'm certain they'll say yes. So those are the two surveys that you'll be seeing, one that went out in an email today, one that will probably be coming out on Monday. As I mentioned, our intention is to produce a workshop summary. This will include all of the speaker presentation abstracts. It will include the poster abstracts, a list of all of the attendees and their contact information, summaries from the topical sessions, key points that came out, and steps to move forward along with these potential collaborations. And our intent is to have a draft by mid-April, and you should see, and this will be a PDF document that we'll email, and that'll be coming out in early May. In addition, videos of all of the plenary speakers' presentations will be available on the EPSCoR website, along with all of this other information, and we'll also post the summary report on that website. And as Scott had mentioned, and I think a couple others, where do we go from here? This is not the end. This is a beginning. This is a launch of continuing collaborations amongst the tri-states, building stronger relationships between researchers and stakeholders to address key issues. We're all facing that funding crunch, so if we can tailor our research to better meet stakeholder needs, I think we can all stretch those dollars a bit further and come up with some important answers to critical questions that our society is facing as we move forward. And so some of the possible future venues for continuing this dialogue are, as mentioned, the LCC forums, and there's a climate forum that will be held at, and I believe it's going to be held in Reno on May 3rd that Kelly mentioned. No guarantee that we'll have a little breakout section, but those attending, please feel free to continue the dialogue. And we'll also be talking to Great Basin Consortium members to see about adding a session in their meeting that will be held in December in Reno to further the dialogue. And again, this can happen in informal ways as well as formal. And having said that, I'd like to introduce one of our state EPSCoR directors, Rick Shoemaker. Excuse me. I have that same maker issue that you have. And I know he had another workshop that he wanted to mention and provide some closing remarks. So, Rick?
Thank you. So how many of you, this is your first Tri-State EPSCoR meeting that you've attended? Please raise your hand. I'm just curious to see. This is the first one. Wow. Okay, well, how many of you were at the very first one in Idaho 5 years ago? Yeah, we've been doing this a long time. So this is very exciting to see so many productive relationships occur over this past 5 years. I just wanted to highlight a few things in this context of finishing strong and summarizing where we've been. You know, we started working together because our Track 1 EPSCoR, NSF EPSCoR proposals had similar themes. And we've all been working toward our collaborative science and working with stakeholders in response to both another meeting opportunity and the idea that Nick presented. In Idaho, through our Track 1 project, we're now creating the Idaho Climate Impacts Partnership, which is basically providing a web presence of expertise of faculty that are working on climate-related science, and it's also going to be hosting annual meetings with stakeholders in Idaho. So for those of you who have interest in continuing this kind of a discussion, and particular interest in Idaho or the Northwest region, we'll make sure that you're all aware of that opportunity this fall. The meeting will likely be in October. But we also will be having a good web presence that we might be able to build on that and expand beyond the state of Idaho. Our EPSCoR state governing committees are committed to working together as it makes sense for our 3 states. These Track 1 grants that have been going on for the past 5 years are ending, but one thing we did early on is initiate a program called the Innovation Working Group opportunity, where faculty from at least 2 of our states could propose small meetings where faculty, students, and stakeholders can get together and talk about ideas for synthesis papers or ideas for collaborative proposals. And we now each have pending proposals for new Track 1 projects that's not directly climate related, but there are many strong connections, and each of our states have written in funding to continue the Innovation Working Group concept wherever there's overlap. And so our pending projects, just for those of you who may not know the topics, there is still quite a lot of overlap, and climate and water are certainly drivers in many of these issues that we'll be studying for the next 5 years if successful. So Track 1 Nevada topic relates to solar energy and the water environment nexus. In Idaho, we're proposing a project entitled Managing Idaho's Landscapes for Ecosystem Services. This is really an opportunity for us to work on social ecological science in terms of integrating the social science and economic science into our ecological science. And in New Mexico, it's titled Energize New Mexico, and it's focused on sustainable energy development, as also including a socio-economic and environmental component. So clearly there's continued overlap in what we're studying, and through the Innovation Working Group program, there will be funding opportunities coming up for you to travel, to get together, and to continue some meaningful discussions. And also, we're also very committed to working with our national labs and stakeholders in all of our states. I think our new projects all include very significant stakeholder engagement components. So we're really looking forward to changing the way we work together, changing the way things work and look, but still continuing collaborations as we can. And our state EPSCoR committees are committed to doing that. So I just wanted to thank you all for coming, and it's been great to be attending these meetings for so many years for many of you and getting to know familiar faces. Thank you.
I I'd now like to welcome the New Mexico State EPSCoR Director, Bill Michener, to the stage to provide his comments on the workshop.
Thanks. This has been a truly exceptional workshop, I think. I always come into workshops with a high degree of skepticism because usually it's quite an awful lot of talking heads and not much opportunity to contribute, and you walk away sort of feeling like, you know, wow, what did I just spend all my time doing? And this one I thought was very different, and the few talking head presentations were all really just extraordinarily good. Possibly that's because of the limited number, and you can get 3 or 4 really dynamic speakers as opposed to trying to load up a presentation with 20 or 30. But on the other hand, this one was very different in that everyone really got a chance to contribute via the breakout groups, and I think that's just for me a very different feeling going away from workshop and having the sense that, you know, a lot of people got to get their voices in, and it wasn't just sitting and listening and having people talk at you, so to speak. I do want to point out that we have another set of opportunities that we think will be coming up soon. We hope that will be coming up soon. And many of you are familiar with the Track 1 proposals, but the other big EPSCoR investment of late has been in Track 2s, and we are just now finishing up a Track 2 project amongst the 3 states. And we have a new proposal in review at NSF right now that hopefully will be funded soon if the panelists see the wisdom of the extraordinarily fine writing that went into the proposal. But it's focused on, well, the title of it, first of all, is WC WAVE, and that stands for the Western Consortium for Watershed Analysis, Visualization, and Exploration. And it has 3 components. One is a watershed science research component, and largely bring in young faculty members from institutions across the 3 states. And there's a cyber infrastructure development component that is focused on that WAVE part of it, the analysis, visualization, and exploration environment that will really make it a lot easier for scientists to, 1, acquire data, 2nd, manipulate the data, and then 3rd, analyze and create some really nice visualizations to aid in interpretation by not only the scientists but also the decision makers as well. So that is going to be, that's the 2nd component. The 3rd component is an education component as well that will allow sort of support more or less an IGERT type program for graduate students, and that will also lead to some new curricula being developed for undergraduate colleges and universities as well. So it's a really well-rounded proposal that we hope is funded, and it will support a lot of activities, a lot of collaborations amongst many of you in the audience here. So that's another opportunity ahead, and I just want to thank the organizers for this, Lynn and others who really did make this a very contributory workshop, and hopefully we'll see many more of these supported over the next few years. So thank you all.
I just want to add that Rick and Bill went the extra mile for this workshop. They wear a lot of hats, are very busy as their state EPSCoR directors, and they took the time to participate and provide significant input on the organization of this workshop. So on behalf of, I think Nick is still here. Yes, there. Nick is my conspirator in pulling together this workshop, and we both sincerely thank you for your time, in addition to all of the many people who served on the organizing committee. It really helped pull off this workshop. Well, last but not least, I would like to welcome to the stage our Nevada State EPSCoR Director, Gail Dana, for her closing comments.
First, I wanted to have you join in to thank Lynn and Nick for their tireless efforts in pulling this all together. Thanks. As well as Concur, the EPSCoR staff, and all the people that participated in the workshop. I just wanted to reflect back on the workshop. We heard from, as Bill mentioned, 4 very excellent speakers to set the stage for the workshop. Kelly Redmond showed us in a number of slides that climate change is happening over the long term, but also very importantly that climate variability is happening every day, every month, every year, and that makes it very difficult to plan for agencies to plan for climate change. And Pat Mulroy then talked about how her agency is addressing that those contingencies, and I think she did a really nice job at showing how her agency is basically walking people down the road to get them ready for the event of reduced water supplies. But there's also some very significant tipping points, if you will, that their agency might be facing in the not too distant future. Henry Galtz from NSF provided us with some ways and ideas of how stakeholders, we might engage them in our proposals, that they are allowed to participate, so don't forget about that when you're writing proposals, to think about your agency partners to participate in proposals to NSF. And then this morning, Vince Tidwell presented some great examples on how to bring scientists and stakeholders together in shared exploration and interactive modeling efforts. And I like that he stressed that you really have to give people motivation for doing this. So you have to think creatively with that. And of course, visualization is one of those areas that can excite people. So that's just one mechanism. And then the rest of the workshop, you all spent a lot of time discussing basically mechanisms for bringing people together from different cultures, so to speak, stakeholders and scientists, through things like a lot of talk about communication between these different cultures and how to do that. Communication technologies and tools, reaching out more to the press, to our legislators, engaging utilities more, that there are real opportunities for making a difference here. Donica talked about, and her group talked about, needing more of a shared understanding about what collaboration means to these different groups and what climate change means to different people in different areas. So there were a lot of ideas that came out. I heard a lot of people coming out of these sessions really excited about that these were meaningful. Like Bill mentioned, I too have come away from workshops thinking, well, that wasn't very good use of my time, but I got a real sense of people finding value in this and saying, yeah, I talked to this person and we're going to do this, and some excitement going on there. So you need to hold on to that excitement. And Scott mentioned yesterday, Scott Mensing, about how you do meet people, you do get new ideas at these conferences and workshops, and then you get back to the realities of needing to get your work done. You kind of let it go by the wayside. So again, I challenge you to hold on to that, the excitement, the ideas, and get creative about how to move these ideas forward. And we talked about a lot of these, of course, the standard mechanisms of proposals and publications, but think about some new ways possibly of making these things happen. You can set up collaboration spaces. I don't know if Carl is still in the room, but talk to some of your cyber infrastructure friends about setting up online collaboration spaces. Pick up the phone, Skype. I know people forget about the phone because you can email. But a lot of times just picking up the phone and saying, hey, I wanted to talk to you about those things we talked about at the conference. You can, it's just a few little buttons you push on the phone. And I just wanted to end with a couple of slides. Let's see. These first ones are not mine. It's not advancing. Oh. All right, so these are my ending slides. So make it happen and act now. And thank you all for coming and spending 2 days with us in Nevada, and look forward to seeing you all in the future and collaborating with you.
Well, Gail, thank you so much for those last 2 slides, because that's going to be my final words to you folks too, is keep the momentum going as happened in some of the discussions at my roundtables. Persevere. We need perseverance. We need to continue the dialogue. Communication is key. And so I'm really looking forward to working with Lee and Kelly and some others on helping to move that dialogue along. Of course, we can't close out this session without exercising our hands a bit. I don't know, we got a few of our EPSCoR people here. I cannot tell you what a tremendous asset we have here in Nevada in our EPSCoR staff and team. They have just been working like crazy, late nights, weekends, and it's like, as faculty, we kind of get used to that, but from our EPSCoR personnel, and I'm getting emails at 10 o'clock at night, I'm just like, oh my gosh, they're going above and beyond. So I would like us to give a round of applause to Marcy, Martha, Michelle, and their staff for all of their hard work. And then I'd like our 3 session moderators to stand up. Little did they know when Nick and I contacted them and twisted their arms what they were in for. And they have absolutely been phenomenal, and I think you'll agree with me. I think they've done a wonderful job in summarizing your input, leading the discussion, and now we're going to tap them for putting this all in writing. So, session moderators, thank you. And my final thank you is to all of you. This workshop would not have worked if everybody sat and put their hands under their legs and didn't contribute. We had people from the community, from federal agencies, from land and water regulators, and then all of the tri-state students and faculty commit time and energy to this, and each of you participated. So a sincere thank you. Any success coming out of this workshop is all due to you. So yay, team.